Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Emily and I talk about books and about makeup and other stuff that I like. So today we are going to be talking about my top 5 favorite books from the first half of 2020. So I love to read and I read a pretty wide range of things. I mostly read middle grade, any kind of novel. I teach 4th grade, so I kind of, in addition to me enjoying reading middle grade novels, it also kind of helps with my job. So I read a lot of middle grade and I read a lot of adult thrillers. So it's kind of, and some of the stuff in between. So this year I've been rereading a lot of my favorite books from when I was younger. If you're interested in seeing me read any of those out loud, I have another channel for my students where I read out loud some of my favorite children's books, so I'll link that down below. But I've been rereading some of my old favorites, but I've also read a lot of really great new books this year. So my 2020 reading goal is to read 52 books, and I think I have read 37 so far, so I'm off to a good start. And during everything that's going on in the world right now, kind of quarantining, staying at home, I've had ups and downs of reading. Normally I listen to an audiobook basically constantly. I drive to work every day, drive home every day, anytime I'm in the shower, if I go for a walk, any of that. But since I haven't been driving to or from work, I haven't been working by myself in my classroom grading papers. A lot of those times that I listen to audiobooks have since gone by the wayside since March, and I just haven't had the urge to read as much. I don't know, this whole quarantine thing is messing with my brain and making it hard to focus on things. But I've still been able to get quite a bit of reading done. And I wanted to talk today about my favorite books from the first half of this year, so the first 6 months. Last year I did a wrap up of my favorite books of 2019 at the end of the year, and it was really fun. So I wanted to make another one right now for the first half of the year. So I decided that I was not going to include any rereads in this, because then, it would be not just my favorite books of 2020, it would be like my favorite books ever, but you guys don't need to hear me talk about The City of Ember for 2 hours constantly. I could do that, but I'm not going to. So I wanted to talk about my favorite books that were new to me this year. So I'm just going to pick 5. I only own 2 of them in physical copy, but I picked my 5. I'm going to go through them from most recent read to least recent read. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and get started. Alright, so the first book I want to talk about is this amazing graphic novel called When Stars Are Scattered, and it is by Victoria Jameson and Omar Mohammed. So it's absolutely beautifully illustrated. Like I said, it's a graphic novel, so it looks really thick, but it's a pretty fast read. It's a middle grade graphic novel. I bought it to add to my classroom library, and I'm so excited for students to get to read this book. I actually learned a ton. So this is about 2 brothers who are growing up in a refugee camp. They're from Somalia and they're living in a refugee camp in Kenya. And it's basically just about their lives and about what it's like to grow up there, especially what it's like to grow up there when they don't have their parents with them. And the older brother, it's actually based on the real life of this author, Omar. So the older brother, Omar, is, has to deal with the complicated life of being the oldest child but still being a child and having to help care for his younger brother who has a disability, but also wanting to go to school to be able to advance his life and move forward because he really likes to learn, and that's also how they get opportunities. So it's incredible, very poignant, a wonderful story about 2 brothers, and the illustrations are amazing, and I absolutely loved this book. I gave it to my dad right away and he read it really fast and said he really enjoyed it and learned a lot from it too. So, and there's also at the very end, I also recommend reading the different authors' notes at the end, because it kind of tells you about what in this book is, what happened after the book, what in the book is true, what kind of happens in between, and stuff like that. So amazing book. Really recommend it whether you are a child or an adult. Alright, the next book that I wanted to talk about is called The Twisted Ones, and it is by T. Kingfisher. Sorry, I'm looking down. I've got my computer down here with some notes, but I loved this one, and I really surprised myself with how much I loved this one. I've been discovering that I actually really like scary books. I hate scary movies. I cannot watch scary movies. They give me nightmares. Even just I saw the trailer for that movie Ouija, I think it was called. I don't know, the one about a Ouija board. I saw the trailer for it in the movie theater, and I had nightmares about it for like a week. So if I can't even watch a trailer to a scary movie, I don't even want to watch the rest of the movie. But I accidentally read a book last year that was scary. I thought it was just going to be like a thriller, but it ended up being more of a horror. But I loved it so much. It was called The Winter People, and I talked about it in my Best of 2019 wrap-up. So I've been slowly branching and reading a few more like horror or just scary thrillers. So I picked up the Twisted Ones from my library as an audiobook, and I listened to this one. This was probably a bad decision because it did scare me a lot, but I listened to it while I was on walks. I don't recommend listening to books about scary things happening in the woods while you are walking through the woods. However, I do really recommend this book if you like creepy horror, and when I read a little bit more about it, I'm not very educated on the horror genre and different subgenres of it, but evidently it is classed under folk horror. So basically, sorry, I should give you a synopsis before I start talking about how I feel about it, because you're like, Emily, what are you even saying? Anyways, so The Twisted Ones. It's about a woman named Mouse who, because of a sense of family duty, decides to spend a few days cleaning out her late grandmother's like hoarder house. So she goes and she cleans it out. She finds her step-grandfather's journal, and at first it just seems like crazy old man ravings, but then she starts to creep up on her a little bit, and then she's noticing some creepy things in the woods behind the house, and it's basically about her investigating them, finding out things, deciding like, is she crazy? Is there really something terrifying there? But it like had me looking over my shoulder the whole time I was reading it. Again, probably partly because I was walking through the woods and creepy stuff was happening in the woods, but it was so creepy. The characters were absolutely amazing. Like at first I thought some of them were kind of quirky and weird, but like then I realized they were quirky and weird in a good way. This book was incredible. There is a dog in it, and I will tell you, there are parts where you think the dog is not going to be fine. The dog is fine in the end. I was like, oh no, am I reading a book where the dog dies? The dog does not die. So if that would put you off, don't worry. So it was so creepy, and the atmosphere, I just like, it's hard to describe if you haven't read it, but I really recommend this one, and I haven't seen anybody talk about it. I think on Goodreads, you can see I'll link my Goodreads down below, but you can see different people's reviews, and you can see if there's reviews of people you're friends with. I'm the only one of my Goodreads friends, I think, who has read this book, and I don't understand why, because it is amazing, and I think anybody who likes a creepy or scary story should definitely read it. Alright, so the next book I want to talk about is 9 Perfect Strangers by Liane Moriarty. So I read Big Little Lies last summer by Liane Moriarty, and I loved it, and I was really surprised by how much I loved it, because in general I like a fast-paced, plot-driven novel, but Liane Moriarty writes these really slow-burning, character-driven novels with little like hints of plot and thriller and twist thrown in, so that when there's a twist at the end, it's very it's still surprising because it's a twist, but it's not totally unbelievable, even if it might have seemed like it was. So 9 Perfect Strangers, I have heard mixed reviews on it, but since I did love Big Little Lies so much, I wanted to read another book from the same author. So I listened to this one again as an audiobook from my library. I highly recommend using your library card to get audiobooks for free. I've discovered some, like the Twisted Ones was just one when I searched available audiobooks, it came up, but 9 Perfect Strangers I had put a hold on for a while. So I do a mix of just randomly finding books and also listening to books that I've wanted to hear for a while. So really recommend it. It's a great way to discover new titles. But anyways, I loved this book. It was, again, just like Big Little Lies, it surprised me by how much I loved it. So in this book, it's about 9 strangers who all book a stay at a health resort. So they all have a different backstory and a different reason for being there, but they've all heard good things about this health resort, and they want to go and kind of like, change their life, like why you would go to a health resort. And it's told, you guys know, if you know me and you have watched any video I've ever made about books or heard me talk about books in person, I love a book that is told through multiple perspectives. And if it's an audiobook and there's different narrators, that's even better. I think this just had one narrator, but it was a really great narrator. So each chapter is told by a different character, and they are talking about both their past and about why they want to come to the health resort and about what's happening there. And things start kind of going sideways after a little bit. But the thing to remember with Moriarty's books is that they are so slow burning that I really think I personally love it as an audiobook. I have another one of her books sitting on my shelf somewhere. What's it called? What Alice Forgot. So I would love to read that book, but I'm a little bit wary of tackling that one because, again, like most of her books, it's pretty long, it's pretty thick. And because it's such a slow burn, I feel like, to me, I love that as an audiobook because I can really get invested. I like the voices of the characters. I like to, kind of hear them speaking, for themselves. But it's harder in a physical book for me to get behind such a slower burning character-driven novel. But so I wasn't sure for quite a while. I kind of thought, like, this book is really interesting, but when's it gonna pick up? And then when it picked up, and I can't even tell you anything because it would give things away. But it just, she drops these like subtle hints where you're like, is that, did she mean, are they? Yes. So I really like this one. If you've read Big Little Lies, I think you would like this one. And if you like slow burning character driven novels, you would definitely like it. But even if you're like me and you like a plot driven thriller, I would still recommend giving one of her books a try because I've actually really enjoyed them, especially as audiobooks. This is No Exit by Taylor Adams. So this book blew my mind. I packed this when my mom and I went down to Florida to visit my sister. I read the whole thing on the plane. From DC to Florida is like, it's a 2-hour plane ride, and then like a little bit before and a little bit after, but I basically read this whole book in like 3 or 4 hours, and I could not stop reading. Like, it was one of those where the flight attendant would come by and she asked what I wanted to drink, and I just like needed to make sure I had my place. I didn't even close the book to put down my tray table to set my ginger ale down. My book was still open. I was like still reading while I'm like cracking open my ginger ale and drinking because I like needed to know what was gonna happen next. This book it's like the total opposite of 9 Perfect Strangers in terms of plot driven. This is like twist after twist, page after page of just like action packed. I have a feeling that one day this is going to be made into a movie, and I probably won't like the movie because I usually don't like movies that are based on books that I love, but I think it would make a very good movie if they did it exactly the way I picture in my head. So basically what happens is the main character, her name is Darby, which is also, I feel like, just such a fun name that you don't hear. It's not like an Emma or like, some boring normal name. Darby, like, it's fun, different. But Darby is driving home from college. Her mother is sick with cancer and she's going to visit her, which sounds like it's going to be really sad, but that's like just something that's like a whole background layer. On her way, a giant snowstorm hits, so she pulls over to try to wait it out, and she ends up getting snowed in at this rest stop with, I think, 4 other people. It's been a couple months since I read this, but with a couple of other people. And at first, you think it might, well, if you've read the synopsis, it's not going to be, but it seems like Darby thinks maybe it'll be a fun time where, like, strangers become best friends, and it'll be quirky, and they'll keep in touch like throughout the years, and it'll be like a cute little Disney Channel movie. But no. She goes outside to try to get a cell phone signal, and she catches a glimpse of a little girl in a cage, like gagged and bound up in the back of somebody's van. So one of the people she is snowed in with is a kidnapper, and she doesn't know which one it is. So basically the rest of it is her trying to figure out, it's kind of like a locked room mystery almost, but it's like her trying to figure out who are her allies, who is the criminal, what is going on, why would they even be stopped there with a little girl locked in the back of the truck, like what are they doing, and also trying to get out of this snowed in rest stop in the middle of nowhere. So like I said, I could not put this down, and there were so many twists in this book, and some of them were so like, when there's a twist and you're like, you totally saw it coming, but it's in a good way where you're like, yes, I knew I was right. Like, yes, I predicted that, right? So there's some that are like that where it's really satisfyingly predictable, but then there are others that feel like they come out of nowhere, but again, not in a bad way, not in like a, what? Why did they write that? That doesn't make any sense. It really felt like an action movie in a book, and I think if you have read Final Girls by Riley Sager, I think you would love this book. I also really liked that one, but if you're a Riley Sager fan, I think you would like this one. And I keep meaning, this is my official reminder to myself, I need to look up Taylor Adams and see what else he or she has written, because I loved this book so much. And this was just a random one I picked up. I don't subscribe to Book of the Month anymore, but I picked it up as an add-on from Book of the Month just because, I don't know, the synopsis sounded interesting. I wanted an extra book. This blew me out of the water. It was so good. Okay, so the last book I wanted to talk about is Daisy Jones and the Six. So if you like keep up with popular book releases, you probably have already read this one, but if you haven't read it, I so recommend it, and I specifically recommend it as an audiobook. So it is a story about basically like a Fleetwood Mac inspired, like a story of a 70s rock band and their rise and fall, and basically their whole story told through retrospective interviews, which is such an interesting way to tell the story of, somebody talking about a time when they were like really into drugs and rock and roll when they were like 22, but looking back at it from when they're older and have the hindsight. So first of all, absolutely incredible premise, and second, the writing was just amazing. And I loved it as an audiobook because it's one of those with a full cast. I love a full cast audiobook. Like, nothing makes me happier than a full cast audiobook. And it was like so immersive. I would listen to it when I was driving, and then I wouldn't want to get out of the car when I was going someplace I wanted to go, because I wanted to keep like living in that world of the book. So it's told through these interviews, so you would hear each character telling their side of the story. So sometimes you would hear it from an event from somebody's perspective, and then the very next part would be from somebody else's perspective, and it would sound completely different because it was two different people looking back on a past time in their life. So the audiobook specifically was just absolutely incredible. But it's a lot of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, like you would expect from a story about a band like that, but it's also, there's so many poignant moments about love and about what it means to, discover yourself, and how people who are really different and how people who are really alike, how those relationships work together and how they work against each other and how they cause conflict. And it was amazing, and it's very different from most books that I read in general. Again, there was a lot of plot, but it was much more character driven. I think this was one of the first books I read this year, and I was really like, I read so many thrillers, I really just like want to go out on a limb and try something different, and everyone's been talking about how good this book is. I was not prepared. It was so good, and it was beautiful. I recommended this one to my boyfriend because he really likes music and he likes music history, and so I think if you're really into music, especially if you're one of those people who loves the idea of an album, like when I listen to music, I listen to like different songs that I like, and I put them into a playlist with a bunch of different artists. But I know some people really like to listen to an album from start to finish all the way through as it tells a story, and I think especially a lot of older music, back when you would buy it on a record and you couldn't make a Spotify playlist, is meant to be listened to that way. And there's multiple like chunks of this novel where they talk about the construction of an album and how it went from just an idea for a song and how they decided to record it. So there's all kinds of like music history stuff. There's amazing character development. This book was just really, really beautifully done, and I would definitely recommend it. And I know I've also seen some people say it was hard to get into. If you're feeling that way, I so recommend try the audiobook, even if you're not an audiobook person, because the immersive full cast, and I think anything that's told through interviews especially, makes an amazing audiobook, because it puts you in the story more, because that's what's happening, is the character is speaking to somebody else. So having them speak to you and tell their story to you is just like a totally different experience, and I think it's amazing. Alright, so that wraps up today's video. Those were my top 5 favorite books from the first half of 2020. So I'm looking forward to, at the end of 2020, making my video about all of my favorite books this year. But yeah, those are some of my favorite ones. So please, please, please leave me a comment down below and tell me any of your favorite books that you've read this year, even if they're rereads or if they're new books, or if you've read some of the books that I liked. What were your thoughts on them? What do you think? Did you hate them? Did you love them? Do you have any recommendations for me? Basically, just leave a comment down below about anything you want to leave a comment down below about. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos about books and about makeup. I'm going to try to maybe alternate them. I don't really know. I'm still getting the hang of it. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye.